Are you launching a business? Get more from Northwest Registered Agent. Protect your privacy, build your brand, and get your complete business identity in 10 clicks and 10 minutes. Visit northwestregisteredagent.com/achiever free. Layoffs aren't as complicated for our wallets and our sense of what we're doing every day. They are very, very thorny emotionally. And so today, we'll explore how to heal after a layoff. I'm Aarons-Mele, and this is The Anxious Achiever, the show that looks at the intersection of mental health and work and leadership and asks, how can we do it all better? I was at the hair salon yesterday, and two women were talking about their adult children, both of whom had been laid off within the past few weeks from pretty high-profile sounding tech jobs. They said, gosh, it's getting bad out there. And it is. October 2025 was the worst October for layoffs since 2003. Layoffs are painful, they are financially challenging, and they hit us where it hurts. And so today, Yowei Shaw takes us through her own healing after a layoff, what she learned about the sense or nonsense of how organizations do layoff, and most importantly, her instructions to find healing after a layoff. She is an emotional investigative journalist, and you'll really enjoy our conversation. Yowei Shaw on healing after a layoff. You are an emotional investigative journalist, which I think sounds like the most needed and coolest thing ever.
Thank you.
Tell us what that entails.
Okay, well, I'm glad that it has struck a chord because originally I started calling myself that as a bit because I was like, this is very silly. So basically, an emotional investigative journalist is where I investigate feelings and I take them seriously. I feel like this is a kind of journalism that I've always gravitated towards. So at Invisibilia, we would cover feelings. We did a whole show about emotions that I produced, and that was fascinating. But oftentimes the feelings were like part of the narrative, like we're trying to get that emotional arc and, gold tape is people crying and blah, blah, blah. But I think that feelings drive so much of our behavior. We know this. This is like what social science tells us. Why do we feel the way we do? What are the systems, ideas, dynamics that are shaping the way we feel? And, there's also this whole realm of emotional hangups that I'm interested in. Let's say you're an introvert who's feeling resentful of the extroverts in your life. Not a very serious problem, but it still has some stakes. It still bothers you, speaking from experience.
I speak from experience. You can get punished at work if you are not considered extroverted enough.
Exactly.
You can be seen as not a leader if you are.
Exactly. Or if you're let's say, you have friends who are very extroverted and they always want you to hang out and you love them, but you can only take so much of hanging out a week.
And your nickname is Grandma.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, that might as well be my nickname too. That's a hang up that's it's kind of serious, but it's not really that serious, but also it has real power over your life and your relationships. And so I wanted to make a show where we dive in to these kind of intangible, confusing feeling mysteries. And then basically I help you report on your feelings. I go find the experts. I go find strangers who have shared experience with your problem. Either they're further down the road and they have wisdom to share with you, or maybe they're on the other side of your problem. Like maybe they're the villain, quote unquote, in your story. And I've just found going through the quest, the experience of reporting on your feelings, it always makes you feel less stuck in the end. I'm not promising that we're going to fix your problems or whatever, but there's something about the quest, the exploration, that it feels like something shifts. And that's what I want to do in the show.
That's not dissimilar to what we try to do on this show, to be honest, in the context of leadership and work. Feelings are, of course, ever present and a huge driver in everything we do. But when it comes to how we show up at work, we really don't like to think about them or talk about them. It's really hard.
And I find that when we do talk about them, there isn't a shared language, or it's hard to talk about in the context of work because either you can feel like you're being too much, or you don't know how to like where's the line of being too much, or, it's unprofessional, or when you need to discuss your feelings, because it's really important to name that in the room so you can be a better coworker.
Okay, so let's talk about layoffs. I this is something that unfortunately is in the water.
Yeah.
In America these days. And I want to just get a little history about you, but I want to start at the moment of your layoff. Was it a surprise?
It was not a surprise, and it also was a surprise. At NPR, they told us, they gave a huge heads up to everybody that they were going to lay 10% of us off because they were going through budget trouble. And they told us that we'd find out in a month. Cue the collective panic attack for everybody for an entire month. And so, so the possibility was very real for anybody. Like I really didn't know what was going to happen to me, my team, my show, my colleagues. And so everybody had to reckon with the possibility of losing your livelihood for an entire month. And then we found out, we were told that we would get an email that, the next day we would find out. If you got the email and it had the subject discussion in it, then you were going to get laid off. And so the morning that I knew those emails were going to come, I actually recorded this because I'm a podcast journalist, and that's my toxic trait. As I go through things, I'm like, maybe this will be useful. And so I recorded myself opening my laptop, and then I checked my email, and there it was. And honestly, I did not feel anything. I felt numb at first. Like you can hear it in my recording, which I'm just like, I'm very calm. And then the feelings start to come. And then I start to feel sad, mainly about not being able to work with my coworkers anymore, who I love. And then the roller coaster of feelings start to happen over the next several months.
Were you able to sleep the night before when you knew there was a possibility the email was coming?
That's a good question. I went to the dentist around that time just for a regular checkup, and they're like, "Oh, you've been grinding your teeth." And my husband, he would tell me because I usually fall asleep before him, he would be like, "You're grinding your teeth at night, it's loud." So I would fall asleep, but clearly I was stressed. And to go back to the moment, whether I was surprised or not, the reason why I say I was not surprised, but also I was surprised, is because even though I had the biggest heads up, right? NPR is telling us, you might get laid off. We'll tell you in a month. It was still such a surprise that it happened to me. This is the reason why I decided to, report a whole series about this, because I think that I felt safe, if I'm being honest, because I think that my operating system up to that point had been, if you work hard, you will be safe. I come from, an immigrant family, lots of people, immigrant or not, that's the operating system of if you work hard, if you do a good job, you will be safe. You will be rewarded. This is the myth of meritocracy in our country. And intellectually, even though I know that's not how the world works, we live in a scary, volatile economy. Anybody can get laid off. Even though I intellectually knew that, emotionally, deep down, I think I thought I would be safe. And that's why it was still such a surprise and shock.
To the point of interrogating emotions for a sec, it strikes me that if we don't give ourselves some kind of framework, no matter how mythical it might be, it's hard to show up and push and do a good job every day. So
Exactly.
We all have to have a story in our head. We have to have a narrative, and your narrative of, as long as I work hard enough, I'm going to be safe, and as long as I do a great job, I'm going to be safe. that's very effective for most of us
Oh,
until it
yes.
isn't.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. It's a very comforting illusion. It's very helpful. It's like, why else would you work hard and put in a good days of, like, of course you need to put food on the table. So yes, you don't want to get fired, but like in terms of going the extra mile and sometimes working overtime when you're not getting paid to, like that extra
Yeah.
mile, why would you do it if you knew that it actually doesn't matter? It's often random. It's often, this is one of the things I found in my reporting is it is a black box that you will never know the answer to unless you were in the room. Why you were laid off, why you ended up on the list and someone else did not end up on the list. I talked to HR reps who told me a whole array of reasons some of which I really did not want to hear. But at the end of the day, they don't know. Unless you're in the room, you don't know why you got laid off. And that's why I think it really, for those of us who like to ruminate and, like to pick at ourselves and wonder why, like, what could I have done differently? Was it that mistake? Was it that thing? That's why getting laid off, I think, can really, really mess with you because it's a mystery you cannot solve.
That's right. It's the what if parade.
The what if parade.
So NPR gives everyone in the company a month. Did you notice people's behavior changing during that month?
Oh my gosh, it was wild. I've never experienced anything like that. So I was a shop steward for one of our unions at NPR, which was, a very rewarding experience and also very stressful during a layoff. So basically, so many things I noticed. One of them was that I felt closer to my colleagues than I had ever felt before. There's something, it's just like something about collective economic precarity that really like binds us all together. Like we were on Survivor, we were on this island together. We were, people were really stepping up to help each other, share job postings, like volunteering to go on walks together if you need to talk it out, or, like people were stepping up in ways that still move me to this day. And I will never forget it. Another thing I noticed, I feel like people got 10 times funnier.
Really?
Yeah. Like it was like a gallows kind of humor, but like people were just letting the jokes rip just because
why not?
Why not? Why? I think we were using humor as a coping mechanism. One of my favorite jokes during that time was this debate around to cry or not to cry in your layoff meeting. Like, do you try to traumatize the person laying you off and cry and, make them feel really bad for you, make them maybe have a nightmare about it? Or do you, not let them see you sweat? And there was this fun, I'm using the word fun in quotes. There was this fun debate about that I found very funny. So those were the positive parts of what I saw. And then there were the really weird things that I noticed, mainly inside myself. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I felt like I could feel the gears of capitalism grinding inside me in a way that I had never heard them before. They're always grinding, obviously, but like I could hear them so loudly.
What does that mean, the gears of capitalism?
So like I would walk into a Zoom meeting and these are my colleagues who I respect, admire, some people I love, and then every meeting that I walked into during that month, my brain would do this thing automatically that I couldn't get it to stop, where I would just look around the room and wonder which one of us would be cut. I would start doing this math of like who had more years of experience, who might be more expensive for the company, who had more accolades, who had more downloads. It was really dark. I was disgusted that I was doing this, and I would tell my brain to knock it off, but I just couldn't. And this is, it just felt like such a contradiction. Like I'm a shop steward here, like really care about trying to be there for my colleagues. And then in my brain, when I'd walk into these meetings, I felt like I was regressing to my most primitive self, And so that was not fun. I did not like that.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just watching, we started talking about sports, but I was watching the NBA draft, right? And that's literally, it's everybody on air sizing up a person
Mm,
by their stats, by their risk of injury, by their
mm,
age,
mm.
by their temperament, and
Yes.
saying, this person is worth X, this person isn't.
Yeah, and, like, obviously, I don't believe that we could measure human beings by their value to a company. I don't subscribe to that kind of thinking.
But that's capitalism,
No,
right?
exactly, exactly,
Right.
and so that it felt like I was being forced. I still wonder, like, why? I'm pretty sure not everybody felt that way, like, it was just some of us who felt that way. I actually haven't processed the layoff that much with NPR colleagues just because, I needed some space personally after.
One of the things I've heard sort of referenced is that when people know there's a layoff, there's a lot more presence in the office. People work later, come in earlier, a lot more
Yes.
hustle or the performance of hustle.
Yes, actually, that's another thing is this question of like, well, should you try to save yourself? Can you save yourself? What should you do to save yourself? Is it messed up to try to save yourself? Because if you save yourself, then that means somebody else is cut.
The juicy teaser you gave us is the most insane reasons you've heard for how people choose who gets laid off. What were some of the reasons that really shocked you or that you thought, oh my gosh, this is really how it works?
So basically, what this HR rep told me and other HR reps is that a company is supposed to, like, how layoffs are supposed to go down is they're supposed to follow a business strategy decision. There should be some, change in strategy, whether that's tighten up costs or, because we want to like pull out from this country and go into that country. Like there should be a reason why you do the layoffs. And then you go through a process that is very sensical and rational, and then you do those layoffs. The HR rep said, but that is not how it usually works. And so it could be anything from who's the most expensive person that we just need to cut. It could be, who has had the most visibility to the senior exec that's making the decision. It could be, have they heard about you before? Have they heard good things? Have they heard bad things? Have they not heard about you? It could be, I've heard that sometimes there's retaliation going on, like if you're trying to organize or you're somebody who is a squeaky wheel or, maybe somebody doesn't like you, you know, there's truly any number of reasons why you could get laid off. And that was very terrifying to me.
As a small business owner since 2009, I know how important it is to have your business buttoned up from your brand to your legal documents. So when you want more, start your business with Northwest Registered Agent and get access to thousands of free guides, tools, and legal forms to help you launch and protect your business. Your business identity, it's not just your logo or your website. It's everything that shows who you are. It's your operating agreements and your compliance paperwork. And yes, you are going to need those things to have a successful business. That's why Northwest Registered Agent has been helping small business owners and entrepreneurs launch and grow their businesses for nearly 30 years. They're the largest registered agent and LLC service in the U.S. And privacy is automatic with them. So don't wait. Protect your privacy, build your brand, and get your complete business identity in just 10 clicks and 10 minutes. Visit www.northwestregisteredagent.com/achiever-free and start building. Get more with Northwest at www.northwestregisteredagent.com/achiever-free. I think it's also hard, I would imagine, when there's always a percentage of the workforce that is thrown out as the reason, right? Like if we cut 10%, we will achieve this cost savings.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I never thought about until I heard your show, how does that 10% get decided? Unless it's like you said, we're pulling out of India as a business and we're closing that division.
Yeah, and something that I really didn't want to hear that was not good for my hangups around my layoff is that sometimes it is about getting rid of the quote unquote worst performers, you know, which directly goes against what a layoff is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a no fault termination. That's literally a code that the company needs to put in to allow you to get your, you know, your unemployment benefits. They tell you it's not your fault. It has nothing to do with your performance. And yet multiple experts I talk to say that that is actually, that would be a smart thing for a company to do if they had to do a layoff, or if they chose to do a layoff, that would be a smart thing to do.
So there's a technical difference between a layoff and getting terminated or fired.
Yes. Yeah. So getting fired, now that I've learned the difference, I like always have to correct people when they say, oh, you were fired. I'm like, no, I was laid off. Getting fired is the employee is terminated because of something to do with them. Whereas a layoff is a no fault termination. And the reason you're getting terminated is because of the company, something going on with the company. And it's not supposed to have anything to do with you and your performance. And yet that's something that I heard is a possibility. Layoffs are so obscure. We have very few protections for workers around layoffs. And so it really is kind of the Wild West, you know, like the reason why you hear so many horror stories around layoffs is because, you know, a professor told me the norm is quite bad because there's very little regulation about how they need to go down. That's also what's frightening about it.
Is HR the enemy here?
That's an interesting question. No. What I found from my reporting is that HR workers are workers too, and they often have very little power over the decision-making process. The HR department is tasked with executing the decisions often that other execs have made. And so, no, I don't think HR is the enemy at all, even though it can feel that way when you're getting laid off.
You have an example in your show of a gentleman whose HR rep handles it terribly, inhumanely.
Yeah. So, I mean, this person that I interviewed about his layoff, I mean, basically what happened was he had no idea, it came as a total surprise. He walked into the conference room for this surprise meeting and they told him he was laid off and they wouldn't let him go back to his desk to get his stuff. And so when, you know, the HR rep came back with the box of his stuff, they'd spilled coffee all over his stuff because they had been so careless to just like throw everything into the box. And he was drinking a cup of coffee right before he went into the meeting. And so that cup of coffee was now all over his stuff, including some very valuable one-of-a-kind photos he has of his mom that were ruined, that he doesn't have any copies of. And then this HR rep also didn't explain any of the severance agreement, any of the paperwork, and also kind of threatened him, was sort of like, you got to be out of here in 10 minutes. And if you don't leave, I'm going to call security.
Yeah. Locked out of email, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a layoff.
Right. It sounds like more of a firing, right? Yeah. And what I learned from talking to an HR rep about this, and I, you know, basically facilitated a conversation between this guy and this HR rep to talk about it, not the HR rep that laid him off so terribly, but a proxy HR rep. She said that that was the most inhumane story she's heard of a layoff. And she apologized on behalf of HR. And she explained that, like, it really depends on the HR person you have. Sort of the old school way of doing HR is to protect the company from getting sued. And so they're very conservative and they're not really thinking about you, the employee, as a human. They're thinking about, like, how can I protect the company from getting sued? And so that can lead to a lot of this inhumane behavior.
Did you feel shame when you got laid off?
Yes. And I was really surprised to feel shame because, so after I got laid off, in the months after the layoff, I would walk around and I felt like I was a video game character whose points had gone way down. Like I literally felt like my status had dropped, and I would be around people who loved me, friends and family, and I would just be so in my head paranoid that they were looking at me differently, that they thought of me as deficient now. And like, it was just so wild to me that even though I know that this most likely has nothing to do with me, that this has to do with, the company having a budget issue and it's just a business decision. Even though I knew that intellectually, I was just so surprised by how much shame I felt. It just didn't make sense. Like my intellectual reality did not match my emotional reality.
Did the feelings tie into any previous times you felt ashamed?
Honestly, I've never felt anything like that.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think, this is why I did a whole podcast series about it, because it was like such an impactful event for me. And I found in my reporting that it wasn't just me being weird, like there's actually all of these reasons that are very real why I was feeling this way. And it really has to do with a societal issue around layoffs, which is, it's not just that we blame ourselves and, shame on us for blaming ourselves and being so silly. Research shows that there's like actual hiring discrimination that happens against laid off workers and people who are unemployed when they apply for jobs. There are material reasons why we feel shame when we get laid off.
There's stigma.
Stigma, yes. Lots of it.
Does that add to a feeling of loneliness? You said one of the things that was interesting was sort of the camaraderie in the before the storm.
Yes. I didn't want to be around anybody. I, basically holed up. I didn't answer texts or phone calls. I self-isolated because I didn't want anyone to look at me. I did that even though I knew that my friends and family love me and that I actually should be around people and I need support.
So I want to talk a little bit about recovery and your advice.
Yeah.
What do you recommend? Once the shock wears off, how did you process through stages? And maybe you don't recover, I don't know. But what's your insight?
Yeah, so from my reporting and personal experience, it's okay if you are knocked out for a while. I think I was surprised by how long it took me to recover. But like I've seen some, psychologists say that on average it can take 2 years, up to 2 years or more. If you have trouble getting another job, then it could take even longer. So I think the first piece of advice is to just have self-compassion, that it will take time and it's okay that it takes time. Another piece of advice is that it's really important to prioritize and care for your mental health. This is something I learned from the sociologist Yowei Shaw, who did a bunch of work on stigma and laid off and unemployed workers. And, basically he discovered all these feedback loops of negativity that can come from your friends and family if they're judging you, from employers, from your colleagues, from the unemployment system. Basically, there are all these negative feedback loops coming at you to make you feel even worse about your job loss. And the problem is that if you leak negativity in a job interview, recruiters told him, like, well, then you're obviously out of the running.
If you leak negativity,
I think you can feel like if the vibes are not right, if you are exuding negativity, if you're exuding sadness, if you're exuding insecurity, like people can pick up on that. Recruiters told the sociologist, yeah, we can tell right away. And that's if you are lucky enough to get to the interview, because what he found in his reporting is that if they can tell that you've been laid off or are unemployed, you might automatically get screened out in the first place. And so the point is that it might be more of a marathon than a sprint to get a job, and to know that there are these systemic factors that make it hard for you to get a job. Like there's actual, like it's twice as hard to get an interview if they know that you're unemployed or laid off, as opposed to somebody who has the same credentials but has a job currently. So there are odds kind of stacked against you, which make it hard to get a job. It's not your fault if you're having trouble. So it's really important to protect your mental health, to find spaces that are safe for you to vent about your negative feelings. Maybe find solidarity with other laid off people or friends and family who've been laid off in the past and who can understand. I think that there can be a lot of blame and judgment that comes from people who haven't been through this experience themselves, who might be like, why aren't you looking harder? Maybe you don't have the right attitude. And that's not helpful. And I think it's important to just find the people who make you feel good and understand what you're going through. And then my final piece of advice is, maybe do a weird ritual for yourself. When I got laid off, I felt like I was in uncharted territory because we don't really talk about layoffs. We don't really make space to examine and grieve this particular kind of breakup. I felt at sea, for a while. Like I didn't know what to do with my feelings. I didn't know how to find closure. And so one of the things that I did that I was moved to do that, I don't even really understand why I did it, but I clearly needed to, was I decided to make a Layoff song and a music video of myself pole dancing in a Kleenex box costume. Not really sure why, but just because it made me laugh. And it was just like something, I think because it just made me laugh. And so it was this weird little ritual I did for myself that helped reframe this negative experience and also gave me something fun to talk about when people would ask, like, how are you doing since the layoff?
Right. Exactly. Instead of sad face,
I can be like, look at this ridiculous photo of me in a Kleenex box costume.
I love it. We talk a lot on the show about our human need to feel safe, even if that's an illusion. It's a little bit like the illusion of control, right? We have to have some of it. Otherwise, we couldn't keep functioning. I know you haven't gotten another salaried job since the layoff, but do you think that this experience has changed how you view safety and security?
Yes, 100% yes. I think that getting laid off really freed me from the illusion that a job will keep me safe and that if I do well at a job, I'll be safe. And weirdly, getting rid of that illusion for myself makes me feel safer because now I will be prepared. If I happen to get another, salary job, I'll know that it could come for me at any moment. And I know that sounds scary and not fun, but there's actually been a little bit of research on this. And the emerging research suggests that people who do not expect to get laid off are much more wrecked emotionally than people who do expect it or are aware of the possibility. Part of the reason why I was so wrecked by my layoff is because I had that illusion of safety. I will be safe if I work hard, even though that's not true. And then the other way that I think that it's changed my relationship with security is it's kind of like the worst thing, quote unquote, professionally happened to me. I know that's not true. There's so many other things that could happen, but this is one of the worst things, right? Like losing your job, losing your livelihood. And that worst thing happened. I also just want to say that I was very privileged to have severance. We had a very good union contract. I don't have kids. I had savings. I have a partner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking from a place of material privilege here with my layoff. But from that perspective, I can say that getting laid off and having the worst thing happen to me was oddly liberating because now I have less F's to give. I'm just okay, I can handle that. So if it happens again, I'll work through it and I'll be okay. I know what to do now. I know the drill. And it has allowed me to basically shoot my shot and not be so afraid if I don't succeed because it's okay. It's okay if I don't succeed.
Another theme we talk a lot about on the show is identity and professional success. You worked at NPR, which for journalists is one of the biggest brands there is. I would imagine you probably had a lot of identity tied up in your work, in that brand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Has that shifted going forward in terms of like your identity as it aligns to a place of work or your career?
Yeah. I mean, I had never really thought that my identity was so wrapped up with being at NPR until this happened. And then oddly, it's been liberating to be now now I can just be a weirdo journalist who investigates feelings. You know, like I can be me. Like I feel like finally I'm just like, okay, here's my show. Here's me. Here are the things I'm interested in. And I know I have a very particular approach to journalism. And I don't think it always lined up with NPR. And now I feel I can be truer to like my identity professionally, because now I don't have to worry about upholding the idea of an NPR journalist.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for this week's show. If you like the show, follow us and tell your friends. And please leave us a review. It really helps the anxious achiever get found by people just waiting for our content. I'm your host, Maura Aarons-Mele. Lots more to come in the next episode.